Welcome back to the Niadocraft channel. I'm Daniel, and today I will tell you some tips to improve the graphics of your 2D games. I've made this game mockup to demonstrate the different tips and methods I will talk about. It's a simple theme. The player is a demon warrior of some kind and has to battle different monsters. I've used flat colors for most of the assets, because the focus of this video is on how to make the different elements fit together. As you've seen, the example is a side-scroller. We can break down a scene like that into different parts. The characters and interactable objects, the ground, this one has some depth because there's some vertical movement like in beat'em-ups, the background, and we can also have elements on the foreground. There should be some contrast between them, so it doesn't look flat, but the methods and the amount of separation depend on the artist, so take this as one way of doing it. I've made very few assets for this mockup, because it's just a proof of concept. For a real game, you should add different versions of foliage and stuff, so it won't be so easy to spot the repetitions. Deciding where to place each asset has a bit of trial and error, but it's not random. I'm trying to create a nice screenshot. It should have a nice composition, and if it's possible, a bit of storytelling. Before putting everything together, I've made the ground as one big sprite. I've placed the enemies around the campfire. I've treated the fire just as part of the environment, but if it had some use in gameplay, we should be more thoughtful about where it goes. Also put the tree trunks in a way that creates some kind of fence that separates the player and enemy area. The player will encounter first the melee enemy, and then the mage might start attacking you from the distance. But it could also be a cinematic where the demon boy encounters his group. They are all monsters, so it could be the case too. You can apply some rotation, resizing, and flipping to make it less obvious it's the same branch and foliage. Also do some layering to hide the shape of the objects. For example, here I've used grass to block the base of the second trunk. The castle is the most distinct asset from the background. I could have used multiple copies with different sizes and positions, but I think using it just once makes it more special and creates a nice composition. I've made some changes to the mountains because they were too small, and also added a few clouds. To add depth to the background, I've used the idea of atmospheric perspective. It's an effect that happens in real life. You can see it in many landscapes with faraway mountains. As the mountains get farther away from the viewer, they become less saturated and closer to the color of the sky. I've separated the mountains into close, medium, and far distance, and played with the colors and opacity to replicate this effect. Now the background has some depth, but because there's no foreground, the ground itself looks a bit flat. I've done a few layers with the airbrush, so there's a gradation and it gets the darkest at the bottom of the screen. This adds contrast and directs the eye to the walkable area that is the important one for gameplay. I've also done something similar to create distance from the background. There's a few more things we can do to make the characters stand out. We have to create some kind of hierarchy. On the top, there's the interactable stuff. The characters and objects we should make stand out from the rest. The methods and amount of contrast we use depend on the type of game and the art direction. I think high contrast makes sense for more arcade or cartoony visuals. For a more cinematic or serious look, you would be more subtle. We will focus on two areas, line art and color saturation. You can make this hierarchy where the player and interactables have the darkest and more saturated outline. You can use a color for each kind of object, like a grass patch or a trunk, or just use one for all in the same category. The ones in the background should have lighter colors. You can do the same with line thickness, like adding a thicker outline to the characters and objects. We can apply the same hierarchy to color saturation. If everything has the same amount of saturation, then nothing will stand out on its own. To create some contrast between the characters and the environment, I've reduced the saturation of the foliage and the ground. Like I said before, this depends on your game and your art style, so don't take it as the right or good method for everything. The final step is where I do some adjustments to improve the colors and contrast. To unify the color and make it warmer, I've added an orange layer in overlay mode with very low opacity. Then I've added a correction layer to adjust the hue a little bit. I found the overall image too dark, so I've tried different layer modes to make it brighter. Ended up using the add glow mode. There's another trick I've used to add contrast. You just have to duplicate everything and merge all the duplicated layers. Then set it to overlay mode and adjust the opacity. For the final touches, I've added a very subtle vignette effect and a bit of glow to the fireplace. And this is how the final mockup looks. Thanks for watching. I just wanted to add a little disclaimer that may be useful for someone. I've structured the video in a way that makes sense for me to explain and to show the improvements, but don't assume I do it in the same order. In reality, there's a bit more back and forth, and it's not so orderly. Better focus on the ideas, and not so much on the exact order. See you on the next one.